I regret to inform you that my daughter, Sarah, has passed away. From the moment she was born, we knew her life was delicate. Yet the pain of her departure was sharper than anticipated. Just yesterday, she was here, smiling at me, diagnosed with childhood leukemia shortly after her birth. Sarah spent her entire life undergoing treatments. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't save her. Today, at the tender age of 3, she left us. I am deeply grateful to the doctor who did everything possible to treat Sarah. From the start of her diagnosis, he dedicated himself tirelessly, never giving up hope for her recovery. He had initially warned us about the high mortality rate of her condition, but her passing still came too soon. I found myself crying beside her small body. Later, her coffin was taken to my parents' home, where both sets of grandparents had gathered to mourn. As they stood by her coffin, the depth of everyone's sorrow was evident. It is clear that Sarah's life was a constant struggle. The doctor had spoken about the challenges in finding a suitable donor and his fears that she might not live past 3 years. Given these circumstances, she lived as fully as she could. During the wake, the atmosphere was subdued, with relatives quietly reminiscing. However, the tone changed when 2 family friends, Howard and Alyssa, who had not seen each other for a long time, began a loud conversation. Their familiarity and laughter felt out of place at such a somber event. Having been friends since high school might explain their behavior, but it still seemed inappropriate. The following day, at the funeral home as we prepared for the final rites, Howard and Alyssa were nowhere to be seen. Driven by curiosity, I went to a back room only to encounter a shocking sight. My husband and sister were in the midst of an affair. On the day of my daughter's funeral, this betrayal was unbearable. In a fit of anger, I locked them in, grasping their clothes in my hands, debating whether to toss them out as a final act of defiance. Overcome with rage, I threw their clothes out of a nearby window. It was pouring rain outside, ensuring that even if the clothes were retrieved, they would be too dirty to wear again. Serves you right, I thought. In that moment of fury, I called both my parents and my in-laws to the front of the room. I moved with the goal of unveiling the truth. I called everyone together, including members from both my family and my in-laws, to the doorway, ready to publicly expose the actions of the 2 involved. My name is Candace, and I have an identical twin sister. Throughout our childhood, we were inseparable, constantly playing and sharing similar ideas. Even though we were alike, my sister possessed a more affable and engaging personality, which made her more popular at school. Despite sharing the same appearance, I often pondered why there was a noticeable difference in our levels of popularity. Maybe it's about having charm or not. You tend to come off as a bit standoffish, don't you? My sister once pointed out. But was that really the complete story? Truthfully, I find it challenging to communicate and interact with people. My sister, in contrast, finds it easy to engage in conversations, always carrying a smile and a friendly attitude, traits that typically characterize a popular individual. Yet, I couldn't dismiss the notion that there might be another reason for her popularity. But you know what? You're actually more liked than me, my sister once admitted. leaving me perplexed. I don't know why. But that's what all the guys say when they break up with me. They say they prefer you. What did that imply? Initially, my sister was liked by everyone. She easily made friends and entered into relationships. But they were short-lived. At the end of each relationship, her boyfriends would reveal their preference for me, blaming my sister's negative qualities. Why does Alyssa always have to play pranks like that? It's unfair to Candace, they would argue. As children, our grandparents showed me more affection, which seemed to bother her. And she would make me cry by hitting or tripping me. When we got to middle school, my sister suddenly became popular. However, as boyfriends began to favor me over her, she grew envious and would complain. Why do people like you even though you don't reach out to anyone? You're so gloomy. It's irritating. From that point, my sister started to see me as a rival and increasingly distanced herself from me. Nevertheless, she continued to date many boys and boasted about her looks, belittling me by claiming she was prettier and had a larger bust. There was a time in high school when I sought her advice about confessions. I developed feelings for Howard, a classmate, but was uncertain about initiating a relationship as I had little experience with boys. Hesitantly, I sought advice from my sister, only to be met with her indifference. She coldly advised me to figure it out yourself. This experience discouraged me from expressing my feelings throughout high school, and I resigned myself to the belief that my affection for Howard would go unreciprocated. Destiny, however, had a different plan in store. To my astonishment, Howard and I ended up at the same university. Our frequent interactions led to a growing rapport, culminating in a romantic relationship. As our love deepened in college, Howard proposed that we move in together, a suggestion I embraced with joy. We shared a home throughout our university years and vowed to marry post-graduation. 4 years into our relationship, I found out I was expecting a baby. Despite our student status, Howard reaffirmed his dedication to me and our unborn child by proposing marriage. I will continue to love you and the baby, he assured. We married 2 months after learning of the pregnancy, with the ceremony coincidentally falling on our graduation day. We remained in the apartment that had nurtured our love, and soon welcomed our baby into the world. Tragically, shortly after birth, our baby was diagnosed with pediatric leukemia. The doctors warned us of the slim survival prospects, though treatments could extend her life. We clung to hope and explored all options, but struggled to find a compatible donor. Despite our efforts, we were prepared for the possibility that she might not survive beyond 2 years. She fought valiantly for an additional year, passing away at just 3 years old. Her early departure was devastating. Yet I came to accept this as the destiny she was born with and bid her soul a sorrowful farewell. Amid these hardships, my relationship with my sister evolved. Since the time Howard and I began cohabitating at college, she started visiting frequently. While initially, I paid little mind to her choice of provocative clothing, over time her behavior sparked suspicions when she began to use strong perfume during her visits. I felt uneasy about her intentions. You always wear such provocative clothing. It's difficult to know where to look. Can you stop? I confronted her, hoping to ease the rising tension. I've always worn these clothes because I don't have any others. And I need to meet my boyfriend later today. She explained. Meanwhile, I remembered how my sister would often wear revealing tops and short skirts, boldly positioning herself in front of Howard, causing him visible discomfort. Since middle school, I had been cautious of my sister's seductive behavior, suspecting she was up to no good. And I believed it was my responsibility to shield Howard from her advances. She consistently tested limits, and I was puzzled by her true motives. At that time, Howard seemed unbothered by my sister's forward behavior, which provided me some comfort. Yet, I was soon proven wrong. I couldn't determine if it was intentional, but it became clear that Howard and my sister had begun an affair during that period. A few months later, after she announced her pregnancy, Howard proposed to me, and we were married shortly after. When I chose to marry, my sister unexpectedly called to tell me she was also marrying Ted, a friend from the same baseball club as Howard. It was unexpected since Ted was a classmate, and their marriage occurred just 6 months after mine. She said, "Seeing how happy you looked, Candace, I felt I needed to marry soon. I've always liked Ted from the baseball club. We were dating, and we just got married." At that moment, I saw a troubled look on my husband's face. I couldn't fathom why he was disturbed by my sister's wedding announcement, but the reason would later become clear to me. "It's been a while since I last saw you. We haven't met since I got married." "Really? When was the last time?" "I didn't expect to reconnect under these circumstances. Now I'm your brother-in-law, so let's get along well." Ryan, who had known both sisters and Ted since childhood and met Howard in high school, had become part of a close trio that often hung out together. Therefore, when these three reunited at my sister's wedding, they agreed to spend more time together, which led to more chances for the trio to gather. As a result, my husband began to go out more often, usually coming home late. And despite claiming to be with friends, he always returned with the scent of perfume on him. I resolved to confront Howard about the mounting evidence of his infidelity. The recurring perfume scent, his frequent absence alongside Alyssa, and their peculiar behavior at our daughter's funeral were too coincidental to ignore. "Howard, have you been noticing that you often smell like women's perfume?" I questioned him directly, eyeing his clothing with a hint of suspicion. He responded quickly, attributing the fragrance to Ryan's girlfriend who, he claimed, was around quite often. "It must be her perfume." "Right. It's a scent I recognize," he added, before swiftly exiting the room. The situation became increasingly suspicious when Howard immediately showered upon returning home, despite there being no obvious reason for him to wash away his scent. He had mentioned plans to spend the evening with his friends, Ryan and Ted. Yet, on several occasions when I visited my parents' home, Ted was present but his partner Alyssa was notably absent. This inconsistency fueled my suspicions further, leading me to question why Ted would be at my parents' when he was supposed to be out with Howard and Ryan, and why Alyssa was nowhere to be seen. My concerns intensified during a particularly grave event: my daughter's funeral. Both Howard and Alyssa acted unusually on that day. They both vanished simultaneously during the service. Ted was reportedly on a business trip and unable to attend, and Alyssa opted to come in attire starkly unsuitable for such a somber event. She chose a tight, provocative dress. Completely out of place at the funeral. My mother, shocked by Alyssa's choice, suggested a more suitable outfit. But Alyssa declined, ignoring my mother's concerns. Their actions, coupled with the recognizable perfume scent on Alyssa, which I knew Howard often wore, deepened my suspicions of an affair. Their simultaneous disappearance during the funeral only compounded my worries. Determined to discover the truth, I began searching unlikely places like the men's restroom and a secluded back room on the second floor. But I couldn't find them anywhere. The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation settling over everyone present. While in the back room, I inadvertently overheard a damning conversation that confirmed my deepest fears. Alyssa was chatting with someone, likely Howard, comparing their physical traits to mine and even contemplating starting a family together. They expressed confidence in their ability to mislead Ted and were convinced that I was too naive to detect their affair. This discussion served as the final piece of evidence I needed to face the harsh reality of their betrayal. Peering through the door, I wondered what was going through the minds of these two, who always seemed to be up to no good. It seemed they were about to escalate their antics, as the sound of rustling clothing could just barely be perceived. Edging closer, I distinctly heard Alyssa propose moving deeper into the room to prevent their voices from being heard outside. Despite her caution, it wasn't long before a series of loud noises erupted, indicating they were fully engrossed in their activities, completely oblivious to the sounds now clearly audible outside. Shocked by their disregard, I quietly opened the door to verify my suspicions. Indeed, they were at the far end of the room, totally unaware of my presence. They continued their noisy interactions, seemingly lost in their own world. "Stop it already. It's my daughter's funeral," I murmured to myself in disbelief and sorrow. I collected the clothes they had carelessly discarded near the entrance and exited the room, my anger brewing. In a burst of outrage, I tossed their clothes out of a nearby window and locked the door behind me. "Dad. Mom. Could you please come to the front of the back room? There's something important we need to discuss," I called out to my parents and in-laws, beckoning them to gather near the room. As our family members came together, the muffled voices of Alyssa and Howard were still audible, contributing to a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere. "What's that noise? Are Alyssa and Howard in there? What on earth are they doing?" Confusion arose among the gathered relatives. Despite the growing commotion outside, the pair inside remained unaware until the moment the door was flung open on the count of 3. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Howard and Alyssa leaped up in surprise, their nakedness leaving them without any semblance of an excuse for their disgraceful behavior. Frantically, they wrapped themselves in curtains, attempting to cover up. "How could you act this way at your own child's funeral?" the fathers exclaimed together, having caught every word of the incident. Outraged, they yanked Howard and Alyssa from their hiding spot behind the curtains and made them kneel on the ground. "Do you understand the gravity of your actions? Do you think such behavior is appropriate?" The fathers reprimanded them sharply, then nodded to one another, opened the backroom window, and forcibly removed Howard and Alyssa from the building while they were scantily clad. "Keep the funeral proceedings undisturbed. We have limited time and cannot afford to waste it lecturing individuals like you," they stated, decisively ending the episode and refocusing on commemorating the deceased. "Reflect on your behavior. You cannot be outside in such inappropriate attire. Especially not when we are prioritizing the funeral. After the service. Be ready for a serious discussion. Unfortunately, it had been raining since the morning, and the weather forecast indicated that it would persist heavily all day. Such actions during a downpour are utterly inappropriate. As a parent, you might feel inclined to argue, but it is you who must use this time to contemplate. Left outside during the funeral, Alyssa and Howard found themselves drenched in the rain, completely exposed. Since Howard, who was meant to lead the service, was absent, I had to step in as the chief mourner. And we managed to conclude the service punctually. By the time I retrieved the clothes I had tossed out, they were thoroughly drenched and spoiled. As a result, Alyssa and Howard had to borrow attire from family members who had brought extra clothing, donning these for their journey home. Yet, their hardships were far from over. Inside the car on the way back, an awkward silence prevailed. Alyssa and Howard, sitting together, bowed their heads in a show of regret. My father, who was driving, appeared unmoved by their remorse and initiated a conversation with me, Candace, about scheduling a meeting at home to discuss the issue further. Throughout the funeral, I had restrained my anger, and naturally, I accepted his suggestion, planning to address Howard in detail once we arrived home. The car fell quiet once more, the only sound being the rain tapping against the windows. As rain drummed on the car roof, Alyssa and Howard remained silent, their heads bowed, eagerly anticipating their arrival home. Upon reaching the family residence, everyone disembarked and made their way inside. Alyssa and Howard lingered, visibly disheartened and appearing as though they had lost all hope. As I walked into the house, I was surprised to find a familiar vehicle parked out front. It was Ted's car, even though he was supposedly away on a business trip until the following day. Inside, I discovered Ted and Ryan deep in conversation in the living room. There you are. I've been waiting, Ted greeted, his demeanor suggesting he knew about the events at the funeral. Surprised, I commented. Ted, weren't you supposed to be on a business trip until tomorrow? He replied. Actually, I never went on the business trip. At this point, Alyssa, who had just walked in, exclaimed dramatically. What do you mean by that? Were you cheating on me? It appeared that Alyssa was attempting to deflect attention from her earlier humiliation by accusing him, thus adding another layer of drama to an already charged atmosphere. Outraged by her bold accusation, Ted snapped back. Who are you to talk about cheating? You're the one who has been unfaithful. Why did you lie about the business trip and not come today? I knew about you and Howard getting close at the funeral because Ryan told me. I fabricated the business trip story to expose your affair more easily. Ted then gestured to Ryan, who had been absent-mindedly toying with his smartphone. Ryan set the phone on the table and played an audio recording. The voices were clear. How about we do something secretive at the funeral? Just between us. That's too risky. We'll get caught. I just love thrilling situations. So let's just go for it once. The voices, emanating from the smartphone, left everyone in the room speechless and shocked. Alyssa's penchant for such reckless behavior was both appalling and repulsive to all present. Alyssa had been this way since middle school. I've been dealing with her antics since then. She has always been involved with various guys because she thinks she's attractive. She relishes thrilling situations and choosing unusual places for her escapades. And she was always scorned by everyone afterwards. I've been hearing stories like this about her for years. Emotion. Ryan, who had been quiet, spoke up as Ted rose to his feet, approached Alyssa, took out a sheet of paper from his pocket, and pressed it against her chest with force. "We're getting a divorce. I've been collecting evidence with Ryan since I began suspecting your behavior. It's appalling to think you were merely exploiting me." Next, Ted reached into his pocket once more, retrieved another piece of paper, and handed it to me. "Candace, you should also divorce him. I'm disappointed in both of them." The deeper I dug, the more flaws I uncovered. There's no affection here. The paper he gave me was an actual divorce petition. I was already aware of Howard's unfaithfulness but hadn't considered divorce until that point. Confronted with the tangible divorce documents, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions. However, as I reflected on Alyssa and Howard's affair, my rage re-emerged, and the concept of a divorce became firmly entrenched in my thoughts. Perhaps divorce is indeed the best course of action for someone who forsakes their child for their own selfish desires. They don't deserve to be called a parent. At that instant, I reached my breaking point. At first, I thought you were a decent person, but I utterly loathe anyone who doesn't cherish their child. I want a divorce. Echoing Ted, I slammed the divorce papers onto my husband's chest and announced our separation. Why? It was just a lapse in judgment. It wasn't a genuine affair. He tried to defend himself. Stop making excuses. I have ample evidence, including photos, audio recordings, and videos. Candace, who was very important to me, looked visibly hurt as Ryan, no longer considering him a friend, laid out a pile of photographs on the table. These images documented covert rendezvous between him and Alyssa, clearly time-stamped. Upon examining them, the dates on the photos matched perfectly with the times Howard had claimed to be spending with Ryan. As we grappled with the shock, Ryan played a video that further exposed the depth of their deceit. They had been meeting in shockingly brazen places, including at Howard's parents' home. The sheer nerve of Alyssa's actions was breathtaking. She had orchestrated these secret meetings right under our noses, never once being detected. The reality of the situation dawned on me as I viewed the footage, my initial fury giving way to a deep sense of revulsion. I'm appalled. Alyssa, how could you entice Howard into this? And Howard, what were you thinking? I voiced in disbelief. Things escalated rapidly from there. In a moment of raw emotion, overwhelmed by emotion, I struck my husband. His face registered shock, and everyone around us halted, witnessing the turmoil that ensued. Both my husband and my sister appeared horrified, fully aware of the severity of their actions. Driven by my feelings, I challenged Alyssa further. You've been attracted to Howard for a long time, haven't you? You told me about it back in high school, when Candace began dating Howard. You tried to steal him from her, I accused, my tone heavy with blame. And Alyssa, you even manipulated Ted, whom you claimed to care about, using him as nothing more than a pawn while you pursued Howard. Ryan, unable to contain himself, interjected with his knowledge. Everything you've said is true, Alyssa. Your friends have told me the same. Unable to bear any more, Alyssa tried to silence him, but her husband held her back. Amid her struggles, our father intervened, giving her a sharp slap to restore order, making it clear she was facing the repercussions of her actions. Stop it, Alyssa. Just because you have feelings for someone doesn't give you the right to disrupt another's marriage. He rebuked her. Turning to Howard, he added, "And Howard, you should never have responded to Alyssa's overtures. Both of you are to blame. Be sure to sign those divorce papers." His stern admonition seemed to usher in a moment of realization as resistance melted into quiet acceptance and expressions of remorse. Alyssa, with tears coursing down her cheeks, begged, "I'm truly sorry. This was all my doing. Please, reconsider the divorce. I genuinely love Ted. I was foolish to be influenced by Alyssa." Howard, also filled with regret, confessed, "I acknowledge my errors, and I will reflect on them. Please, let's attempt to repair our relationship." Despite their sincere yet unsuccessful efforts at reconciliation, my brother-in-law and I remained resolute, our views unchanged by the heartfelt appeals during the discussion. Despite efforts to sway them, the decision to proceed with the divorce was final. When they signed the divorce papers, a tangible sense of finality pervaded the room, subtly shifting the atmosphere as if it were now suitable to discuss lighter topics, like having a coffee. Yet, not everyone felt this sense of closure. Ryan, clearly upset, addressed the group with a threatening presence that exceeded any anger I or my brother-in-law could show. He accused us of concealing the truth and threatened to reveal everything. "Why are you so enraged? It seems I've been the one manipulated the most. Particularly by you," he shouted, his anger directed at Alyssa and Howard. He accused them of pretending to be in love while entering into marriages that only intensified the turmoil. Ryan's tirade suggested that Alyssa and Howard had secretly harbored feelings for each other, which they had not pursued, despite his counsel. Instead, Howard had married Candace, which led to a shocking revelation that left everyone aghast. Ryan's claims stirred up long-buried memories from as early as middle school, causing significant embarrassment for Alyssa and Howard. They acknowledged their previous emotions and lamented their failure to declare their love sooner, visibly overwhelmed by the situation. Why raise such issues now? The divorce is already settled, isn't it? Why humiliate us in this manner? Howard objected, but Ryan was unyielding. His fury was evident, and nobody in the room dared to challenge him. Not even their parents. Ryan also accused Alyssa of secretly meeting with Howard even after his marriage to Candace, and presented a photo as evidence of their rendezvous, which he claimed to have accidentally captured during their wedding time. The photo left everyone, particularly my husband, in shock. His face a mixture of panic and disbelief. His demeanor hardened as he grasped the seriousness of the predicament he had unsuspectingly been drawn into by Ryan's vindictive scheme. A profound silence fell over the room as everyone grappled with the scale of the disclosures and the intricate relationships entwined within this family conflict. The realization that he had been unfaithful from the start of our relationship astounded me. The mere fact that you're from Florida seemed to clarify your actions. And although I thought my anger had somewhat abated with the finalization of our divorce, this revelation reignited it fiercely. In a moment of intense emotion, I slammed my hand down in front of my husband to express my frustration. I apologize for that, it was a momentary lapse. I have harbored feelings for Alyssa for a long time but never confessed them. Instead, I resigned myself to dating Candace. Nevertheless, I couldn't completely sever my emotional ties to Alyssa. And when she showed interest, I was still torn. So, you just went along with it, choosing to settle for me and date me. It's ridiculous. I felt genuinely in love with Howard. Yet it was devastating to come to terms with the fact that he was with me merely because he couldn't be with my sister. I felt exploited. As my frustration mounted, tears started flowing uncontrollably. It was absurd. Both of you merely exploited me. Why did you even coerce me into having a child? Give me back my child's life. It's all your fault. You fool. Overcome with a sense of betrayal by my sister and husband, I broke down in tears. Ryan consoled me, pulling me in for a comforting embrace and assured me that everything would be all right. Gently wiping my tears, he shared that he, too, felt manipulated by them. I don't want to see your faces anymore, he declared as we both insisted they leave. My rage was unmistakable as I yelled at my husband that he would never receive my forgiveness and should brace himself for legal proceedings. His feeble apology did little to alleviate the tension-filled room. Our parents, who had observed the entire ordeal, watched in disapproval. The pressure and embarrassment became unbearable for them, and they hastily collected their possessions and exited our home. Subsequently, my sister attempted to apologize, but our parents could not forgive her, leading to her being shunned from the family residence. Howard also tried to reconcile with his in-laws, but to no avail. He, too, was excluded, having entered the marriage hastily due to past affections. Their personalities clashed significantly, which led to a severe dispute and ultimately a divorce. As a friend later informed me, their downfall seemed warranted, after all. Exploiting someone to facilitate a marriage is no foundation for a lasting union. Indeed, Candace and I were victims. But truly, Ted, you were the most pitiable. Having been exploited so thoroughly, Alyssa had always wrestled with the fact that she was Howard's second option. And this reality was a harsh burden to bear. After some reflection, Howard decided to sever ties with his social circle, which, unexpectedly, brought Alyssa closer to them. One evening, at a casual gathering, Ryan, a mutual friend, offered Alyssa a ring. He confessed that he had long harbored feelings for her but had restrained himself while she was with Howard. Despite his feelings, Ryan had chosen to support her relationship from a distance. Now that she was single, he expressed his wish to go out with her, assuring her that she would never be a backup option. Alyssa, who had already perceived Ryan's feelings through his caring behaviors, was not entirely taken aback when he declared his feelings. Her smile widened as Ryan placed the promise ring on her finger, a gesture of his dedication to their shared future. He urged her to value the ring as a precursor to a formal proposal he planned to make in 3 years. Staying true to his promise, Ryan proposed 3 years later, paving the way for their wedding. Motivated by their romance, their friend Ted, too, found his soulmate and tied the knot. Meanwhile, Alyssa took legal steps against her former husband Howard for causing her emotional pain. The court decided in her favor, granting her a modest financial award as compensation. Although the sum was not large, it represented a moral triumph for Alyssa, recognizing the emotional turmoil she had suffered. As they embarked on their new life together, Ryan shared his wish to reside with Alyssa's family. They enjoyed the closeness of living with her parents, an arrangement Alyssa knew Howard would never have supported. Reflecting on her path, Alyssa felt deeply thankful to have married Ryan, acknowledging that her life had improved significantly since parting ways with Howard. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the above story? Tell us in the comments section. We'd like to hear your thoughts. That's for today's story. Please subscribe and give a thumb up. See you next time.